Hello, this video will show you how to change the display settings on Chrome OS into a different language. Chrome OS is basically all of the operating system here, so when you click on the settings, all of this information on the side can be changed to a different language. Down on the bottom here, this information will be changed to a different language and that kind of thing. So for Chrome OS, you can go up to the top here and type in Chrome://settings/languages. And you can get there by going into settings as well, but if you can't read any of the language up there because you're trying to switch it from a language you don't understand back to English, you would just want to type in this at the top there. When you push enter, that will take you into the language settings, and you can see that in my language settings, I have English set to my top language for Chrome OS, and this is the language that I'm going to be using for my general display. I've added Spanish, which I'm going to go ahead and remove right now because I want to show you how to add it. So if I go down to the bottom here, it says add. And when I push add, it gives me a lot of different languages to add. So I can go through these and just type in a letter as well. So if I type in S, for example, it'll bring that up and it'll take me closer to the S's and it'll kind of show me where I need to go. So if I go down to where it says Spanish, I'll click on Spanish and then push OK. And then Spanish gets added as one of the options on the bottom there. Now, when I click on Spanish, it asks me if I want to use this language for spell checking and if I want to use the Spanish keyboard as an input method as well, so I can add things like tildes a little easier and all that. So if I want to go ahead and quickly push display Chrome OS in this language, select Spanish and then push that, it requires me to sign out. And so I'm going to sign out now and show you what the result is when I get back in. Welcome back. So now it looks as if nothing has changed on my screen, but actually there is quite a few things that have changed. So my bookmarks are still in English because I wrote those in English. But if I go over to the upper right-hand corner here, you can see that this entire section has been changed over to Spanish in here. In addition, all my settings down on the bottom have all been changed to Spanish. In fact, even the time setting has been changed to military time as well. However, when I go over to Google something and I type in something like soccer, for example, what happens is my results still come up in English. So I have all of these things that are still in English over here, and that's actually a different setting to change. Okay, this one is actually inside of Google Apps. So to be able to change that particular one, we're going to go over to Chrome://settings. So I'm going to go do that again, Chrome://settings. And I'm going to go ahead and choose that language as one. And I'm going to switch my Chrome OS back into a language that I understand. So I'm going to click on that and display it in this. But then I have to sign out in order to come back to that. Welcome back. So now that I have Chrome OS configured back in English, I'm going to go ahead and show you how to change the settings for Google Apps so that all of the Google Drive documents and most of the things that students will search for in Google will show up in the language they prefer. So I'm going to go into a new tab and I'm just going to type in myaccount.google.com/preferences. If you go to myaccount.google.com/preferences, you'll receive this page. And there's a language and input tools section. So I'm going to go down in here and I'm going to see that there's an input tool section that I can configure that stays around with me whenever I'm using any kind of Google apps like Gmail or Google Drive. And then there's a language section right here. So I'm going to click on language and just click the arrow. That arrow will take me over to a default language and preferred language section. And now this I don't have to log in and out of in order to change back and forth. So my suggestion would be on this page where it says myaccount.google.com/language, you could bookmark that page and say Google Apps language or something like that. And that would be an area in which you can, let me put this in the right spot, I'll put it on my bookmarks bar and then push done. Now I can take that particular icon and put it somewhere that it'd be easy for the student to get to, so that if we're closed out, we can just click on that and it takes us right to this spot. So right now what I have is I have Spanish and I have English configured in here, and I can add another language down here. So I'm going to click on add another language, and this is where I would search for the language that I want. For now I'm going to delete Spanish, get rid of it, and I'm going to add it again quick. So I click that, and I start typing in Spanish, and even though I know it as Spanish, it knows it as Espanol, so I can type in SP and it's still going to find it. So when I click on that, it will also ask me the equivalent of which Spanish I'm speaking, so which is interesting. So you can click that if that applies, and then push OK. So now I have Spanish here as my second language, but it's not something that's making everything else appear that way. If I want to have it appear in Spanish, I can take this arrow, click it, and it pushes that into Spanish. It's going to reload my page, and now you notice that Google Apps has changed. When I end up going to things like the New York Times, for example, and I Google that, New York Times searches in Google, and then what will start happening for me is that those responses, as you can see in here, are all starting to search in Spanish. So I'm seeing all the things show up in Spanish, all the tools are in Spanish in Google. Even when I go to the New York Times is actually takes me directly to a Spanish one. Look at that, Vladimir Putin, how awesome. Anyway, so you can see this entire page has been translated into Spanish. So the same goes for when I end up heading to Google Drive and open that up. When I head to Google Drive will now be configured in Spanish as well, and so will all of the tools within Google Drive. And you can do that with virtually any language that's available inside of Google Apps. So you can see that everything I'm clicking around on, everything shows in Spanish, but it shows up in a very similar way as it would in English, obviously. So anytime I want to go back, let's say I've closed out all those tabs and I'm not sure how to get back to that section to switch it back to English, I can click on that myaccount.google.com/language and just take English and pop it up there. Now my page will refresh, excuse me, and everything you'll be seeing will be in English at this point, and that should help out when it comes to just switching Google Apps over, Gmail, Google Search, and pretty much all the web-based tools that we use that are in this little bar up here. If you switch that language here, it's going to switch all of the way that these things behave into the language that you prefer. Hi, for the next part in this, I want to show you two tools that are based in Google Translate. The first one is the Google Translate app that you can find in the Chrome Web Store. So if you go to the Chrome Web Store and type in Google Translate, you'll get two options. One of those is Google Translate the extension, which is a valuable tool, and we'll talk about it shortly. But then also the Google Translate application. So if you just go over and push Add to Chrome and install it, it will be a part of your Google Apps or Chrome applications on your Chromebook. Then if you go down to this little magnifying glass, you can then click on all apps. You can find it in here, or you can just search for it and say Translate, for example. So as soon as I start clicking on the TRAN, I can then right-click on it when I find Google Translate and push Pin to Shelf. That then takes Google Translate and it pushes it down here in the bottom, and you can see that application just sitting in my little taskbar. So once you see it on the bottom, you can just click on Google Translate and it'll open it up. Then you can either type into here or you can use the speech input button, and then it can translate for you. So I'll go into some German and click on that for now. Das ist mein erstes Mal in Deutschland. And you can see that as I speak it in German, even though I don't know how to speak German, it pushes that over and recognizes it pretty easily over into English. You can do the same then, of course, with Spanish, and push that around. Hola, mi nombre es Corey. And sometimes it messes the name up because that's not a very common thing, but you can see that most of the time it's going to recognize those words pretty well. Otherwise, just typing it works too. Okay, so this can be a very quick tool for them to be able to have, just having that on the bottom there to be able to communicate something back and forth pretty quickly and be able to use it, which is nice. Okay, the next thing we'll take a look at is the extension from Google Translate. So again, back at the Chrome Web Store, if you just type in Google Translate, you'll end up with these results, and then you'll have the app, which I've already shown, and then the extension. So go ahead down to the extension and you'll push Add to Chrome, and that extension will pop up here in this area, and you'll have that extension around with you from page to page. So let's say that I go over to a website and I'm trying to read that website and it's in English, but I want to have it in Spanish, or at least be able to have Spanish available to me as I need it on this page. The Google Translate tool can help you in a lot of ways. First of all, if you select some text, it can ask you to translate the whole thing, or you can just say translate this page. And so on the main level, you can translate an entire page if it gets difficult, and it can say translate it into Spanish, so it just turned this entire page into Spanish. Of course, some of this might not come out perfectly, but it might be a lot better than it would be if you hadn't been able to translate it. You can push Show Original or just close out of here, and then what it'll do is it'll translate it back into English, and you'll be done with it. Now, if you go over to Google Translate and you right-click on it, or just do your two-finger tap and push Options, the Options area will allow you to select a primary language for the extension. So this is where you would want to make sure that if the student's first language is their primary one, selected in Spanish, then you have a couple of different pop-up options for it. So I've displayed mine as Immediately Display pop-up when I select any text. And the result of that is when I'm reading this in English, if I want to just hear an entire sentence or see an entire sentence, I can highlight that and do nothing else. And what will happen is it'll automatically appear. It'll show me the Spanish version of it after the English version that I've just highlighted. It'll also read both of those to me.
Driverless cars will change the way people travel.
Obviously, it's machine, so it's not the greatest in intonation and inflection, but it's probably better than nothing than the Spanish one below.
Coche sin conductor va a cambiar la forma en que la gente viaja.
So that tool will then allow that person to double-click on anything to highlight it, and that highlight will bring it up, and then we'll show the translation for it. So that can be very valuable. There's a couple other things that tool does, but generally it's the fastest things are to translate an entire page or to translate just a few sentences here and there or a few words as you need them. There are a few other helpful translation tools available, but the last one I'll show you quickly is just how to translate a document from Google Docs into another language. So you can try to use Google Translate for this. But what happens in Google Translate, if you translate a Google document, is that you can notice on the right-hand side here, it kind of gets cut off and things are a little bit problematic. So there's a better way to do it. If you go ahead and close that out and you're just looking at the document again, you can go over to Tools, and there's a Translate Document section. When you translate document, it'll ask you which language you want to translate it into, and then you choose the language that you want. And the benefit of this is that, of course, it translates the document and keeps the formatting. However, the problem with it is that it creates a brand new version of that document. So you'll notice when I push Spanish and I push Translate, it's actually opening up in a new tab for me, and it shows translated copy of. This is now disconnected from the original copy. So as a teacher, if I go back and change my main copy of this one, that will not be connected to this translated copy, and therefore that copy really is just a one-time instance. So just be aware of that. If a student is translating some of the things that you've written up in Google Docs, you will have to have them retranslate it if you make any changes to that document. So that can be a pretty fast one and very helpful. And that's it for now. Please let us know if you need any help.